Behold, my stuff.
This is Andy again, coming to you with Volume 2 of my stuff, talking about Karn Silver Golem today. So this, like my previous video, Marath, is going to be about one of my oldest commander decks, and it's been with me a long time. I don't think the commander has actually changed in the, 8 years that I've had it. Let's take a little let's talk about him for a little bit. So Karn, very big creature or character in the lore, actually created the plane of Mirrodin. I guess it used to be called Argentum, but enough about that. Let's look at the card itself. So Karn is a 5 generic mana creature. Golem, whenever Karn Silver Golem blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4/+4 until end of turn. That is not why we are playing this card at all. We are playing it for its second ability. Pay 1, target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost until end of turn. This does quite a few different things in the deck, but the most important one is infinite mana. Just like Marath, this deck does go infinite, can win with infinite win cons, and is one of my most powerful decks. I would only break it out at a really high power table. This is not one for low level or low powered or just people trying to have fun. People trying to do janky, fun, unique, quirky things. This deck has no place playing with them. So the main combination is being able to untap artifact creatures. There's Karn, the Great Creator, does Karn Silver Golem's ability just with its +1. So until your next turn, up to 1 target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost or mana value. Now, Karn the Great Creator, it's like an alternate Karn Silver Golem. The important card in this deck is Voltaic Construct. Voltaic Construct is 4 mana for a 2/2, and you pay 2 to untap target artifact creature. Now, on its own, in a vacuum, that does not seem particularly good. However, once you add in artifacts that tap for 3 or more mana, it becomes an infinite loop of making infinite mana. So the general idea is you get any one of these non-creature artifacts that tap for 3 mana into play, and you have that, Karn Silver Golem, and Voltaic Construct in play. So you pay 1 to turn the mana rock that taps for 3 into a creature, and you use Voltaic Construct to pay 2 and untap it. So you tap it for 3, you pay 2 to untap it. You tap it for 3, you pay 2 to untap it. You have infinite mana right there. In the middle there, we have Metalworker. Metalworker is a 3 mana 1/2. Tap it, reveal any number of artifact cards from your hand. Add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool for each card revealed this way. So if you have 2 artifacts in hand, taps for 4, 3, 6, up. So Metalworker and Voltaic Construct is infinite mana on its own if you have 2 or more artifacts in your hand that you can reveal. So 2-card infinite combo there. But because these mana rocks produce 3, they're just good and colorless. This deck is all about ramping. You just want them in the deck anyway, and so you can kind of stumble backwards into infinite mana if you have the Voltaic Construct. Another 2-card infinite combo, Basalt Monolith. It's kind of a unique one. It's one of the mana rocks that taps for 3, but it has this ability, pay 3 to untap Basalt Monolith. And it is a 2-card infinite combo with Rings of Brighthearth. Rings of Brighthearth is a 3 mana artifact. Whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. The important thing here to notice is that the untap on Basalt Monolith costs 3, but you can copy it with Rings of Brighthearth for 2. So you would tap the Basalt Monolith for 3, and you're going to need extra mana to get the loop started, but once you do. So let's say you tap the Basalt Monolith for 3, and you're going to pay 3 to untap it. If you have 2 extra mana and you have the Rings of Brighthearth in play, you can copy that untap ability. So it's going to untap with the copy resolving first. You can then tap it again for 3. Then it's going to untap with the original ability resolving. and it untaps again. So you have 3 in your pool, and you have an untapped Basalt Monolith. You can then tap the Basalt Monolith for 3, so you've got 6 in your pool. Use the untap ability, using up 3, you're having 3 left in your pool, and then copying it with the Rings of Brighthearth, leaving 1 left in your pool. The Basalt Monolith is going to untap twice, and you can just continue that cycle. So 2-card infinite combo in here. So between Voltaic Construct and Metalworker and Basalt Monolith and Rings of Brighthearth, you have 2-card combinations that just give you infinite mana, along with Karn and all the 3 mana ones in the Voltaic Construct. So what are you supposed to do with all of this mana? Well, the most obvious one that you're probably already thinking of is Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista is there on the right. It's XX, enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it. Remove a +1/+1 counter from it, deals 1 damage to any target. It's been changed. So if you have infinite mana, you make an infinitely big ballista, just kill all your opponents. Staff of Domination also works really well with infinite mana, to where you gain infinite life, you draw your deck. You know, between those 2 things, particularly the drawing your deck while still having infinite mana, you will win, because this deck, if it can't combo off, if it can't hit infinite mana, it still ramps like crazy and is able to drop down Eldrazi's. Now, this deck does run some of the Eldrazi support. You'll see there's a few other Eldrazi's in the deck. But this is kind of what you're ramping to. This is kind of plan A. Ramp like crazy, drop an Eldrazi. If you stumble backwards into infinite mana, great. You can probably just win from there. The Titans are all pretty amazing. The Kozileks help you refill your hand, help you draw cards. Ulamogs help with some removal, help you kill things. I like the original Eldrazi's more, the ones down on the bottom right and bottom left, because they have cast triggers. So when you cast them, you draw, cast, destroy, permanent, which really helps to get around, counter spells. They also have Annihilator 4, which is incredibly powerful, and they also have when they hit your graveyard, you shuffle your graveyard back into your library, which mill doesn't come up too often in EDH, but it's nice when it does. When you have one of these built into your deck, it can be a lot harder for them to deal with. In the center, we have Emrakul, the Promised End, a very unfun card if you like playing with people that like to play their cards and do the things that they intended to do with their deck. It's essentially a Mindslaver. So you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes an extra turn. Flying, trample, protection from instants. When I first read this years ago, I thought that them getting their turn back was a massive downside. It's not really. You get to wreck their hand, wreck their board, force them to attack into you, to where a lot of times them getting their turn back, it's an incredibly diminished version of what they would have normally been able to do. There are some just alternately good things to drop that aren't on the ridiculous end of the mana value range. Steel Hellkite is in there, just good colorless removal, can destroy non-land permanents. Endbringer can ping things, stop things from attacking or blocking, and very importantly, draw you cards. One of the downsides of colorless is that you do have card draw, but it is quite overcosted, and Endbringer is a pretty good example of that. But we play it because it's Eldrazi. It's a 6-drop, it just does a variety of different things, and it untaps during each other player's untap step. So in a multiplayer game, you can draw 4 cards a turn cycle off of it once you untap with it. Wormcoil Engine is just chonky, 6 mana, 6/6, Death Touch lifelink. When it dies, you make some tokens. Very good way of slowing down the game when you're on the defense, and very good way of pressuring opponents. And Conduit of Ruin, it's one of the many but very good tutors in this deck. So 6 mana, 5/5. When you cast it, you may search your library for a colorless creature card with a converted mana cost 7 or greater, reveal it, put it on top of your library. And the first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less. So this is basically like a 6th Titan. Just goes and gets it for you. And also helps ramp you into them. Once we have our Titans, being able to throw Lightning Greaves on it immediately, or Greaves on Karn to protect it, is great. Haste and Shroud. And Akroma's Memorial. Creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, and haste. And protection from black and red. Both of these just, you ramp into something big, you can immediately use it that turn. Start attacking with it, maybe even close out the game immediately. Being in colorless, although there are, considerable drawbacks. There are some niche perks that really do give you a reason to play, no colors at all. And they come in the form of All is Dust. They're in the center. Each player sacrifices all colored permanents they control. This is like a one-sided board wipe for everything. You get to keep all of your stuff. They get to hold on to their lands and the artifacts they had, if they had any Eldrazi's, but All is Dust is a centerpiece of why you should play colorless. It is incredibly good. It's backbreaking a lot of the time. Ugin the Spirit Dragon is there as well, so for his +2, 3 damage anywhere, but the -X is what's important. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less, that's 1 or more colors. So normally Ugin, get some of your stuff out of the way. In this deck, no, again, it's a little bit like All is Dust. It is capped at exiling things with 7 or less, but it's still incredibly good. And then the -10, if you ever get up to it, which I mean isn't inconceivable. You just have to play it, and then 3 turns later you can ultimate, gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand on the battlefield. If you ultimate it in this deck, you are basically going to win. Over there on the right hand side, we have Ugin the Ineffable. I put him on this slide just because he has the colorless spells you cast cost 2 less, which is everything in the deck. +1 is pseudo draw. You get to make a colorless spirit creature token, and when that token leaves the battlefield, you get to put the card that you exiled face down with it into your hand. So kind of like slow draw. And it also has -3, just destroy target permanent that's 1 or more colors. So again, something this deck needs. Draw and removal, and it's colorless, and it ramps you. So both Ugins are just incredible in this deck. Now for the really unfair, unfun stuff. Mycosynth Lattice. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. All cards that aren't on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colorless. Players may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Now, I know what you're about to say. That does not work with All is Dust or Big Ugin. And you're right. You make everything colorless, those cards become absolutely redundant. However, there are some cards in this deck that go really well with it. So, Clock of Omens, untapped 2 untapped artifacts you control, untapped target artifact. Mycosynth Lattice makes everything you have, all your lands into artifacts. Unwinding Clock untaps all your artifacts during each other player's untap step. All your lands are going to be untapping, so kind of like a build your own Seedborn Muse. And then we have Vidalcan Orrery. You may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. So in the dream scenario, if you have, let's say, Unwinding Clock, Vidalcan Orrery, and Mycosynth Lattice in play, you are getting to cast all your stuff at instant speed during your opponent's turns because everything you control is untapping. But another really strong interaction with Mycosynth Lattice is the fact it turns everything into artifacts, including your opponent's stuff. So if you have Darksteel Forge and Mycosynth Lattice in play, everything you have is now indestructible. Combine that with Oblivion Stone or Nevinyrral's Disc. Nevinyrral's Disc destroys all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Unfortunately, comes into play tapped. Or Oblivion Stone. Pay 5, tap, sack it, destroy all non-land permanents. This turns into a one-sided board wipe, but it's the Nevinyrral's Disc, Mycosynth Lattice, and Darksteel Forge that makes this particularly nasty because you will wipe out literally everything your opponents have, unless they have some indestructible things. Lands, permanents, everything. And you can do it every turn because Nevinyrral's Disc does not sacrifice itself, unlike Oblivion Stone. You can actually just do that every turn, so it's kind of like a hard lock. Lastly, Mycosynth Lattice with Karn, the Great Creator. Now this is a particularly evil combination of cards. I think it got Lattice banned in Modern because the idea is that Karn says activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. And then Mycosynth Lattice turns everything into an artifact, so your opponents cannot tap their lands for mana anymore because they're activated abilities. And you can also start sniping their lands with the +1, killing them off. So this is a really nasty 2-card lock combo. Unless they have a good board presence, there's not a lot they're going to be able to do. So that is the joys of colorless. Let's see what we have next. So now I want to talk about the protection in this deck. There's not a lot of it, but you are trying to do some incredibly powerful things. You do need to stop your opponents from interacting with you from time to time. Those come in the form of Defense Grid and Warping Whale. A Defense Grid says, during each player's turn, each other player's spells cost 3 more to play. Now, I know that this does not work well or synergize with Vidalcan Orrery. When you're maybe casting things at instant speed, Defense Grid basically shuts that card down on your side. But I think the value of stopping your opponent's counterspells or instant speed interaction is worth it when you're hitting infinite mana or dropping a quick Eldrazi. Warping Whale does a few different things, but the important thing is the second mode, counter target sorcery spell. So if they play an Austere Command or Wrath of God or, I don't know, anything that could really hurt your board, like a Cleansing Nova, that could destroy all of your artifacts, Warping Whale is there to protect you. And a lot of people don't really expect it. They don't expect instant speed counter target sorcery spell out of a colorless deck. Or maybe they do. But it's one that you really should have if you are thinking about running a colorless deck. So, I said this in the last video, I'll probably say it every time. You might even get annoyed that I keep repeating myself, but draw is central. And I'm not going to show you every piece of draw in the deck, but there are a few to give you an idea of what this deck is trying to do. So I mentioned that being colorless, you're having to pay overcosted. Your spells are often overcosted or underpowered, but there are a few good ones. So Mystic Forge down there in the bottom left-hand corner. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an artifact card or a colorless non-land card. Pay 1, tap it. Pay 1 life, tap it, exile the top card of your library. This is very strong in this deck because everything's colorless. And you have ways of untapping your artifacts if you need to clear a few out of the way. So Mystic Forge is probably the strongest single piece of draw in this deck, even though you're technically not drawing cards, you're just playing off the top of your library. Karn, Scion of Urza is there in the middle, so he exiles cards from the top of your library that you might be able to put into your hand, and he makes Karnstruct tokens, which are 0/0 colorless artifact tokens that goes +1/+1 for each artifact you control, which, in this deck is truly absurd. The other ones, like Memory Jar, basically a wheel that you can control on your turn. So you play it on one turn, next turn you untap, you have all your mana open. Drawing 7 in one turn is very strong. Treasure Map isn't draw, it's more like filtering, where you're scrying, but getting the 3 treasure tokens and then it turns into a land is enough to push you into Eldrazi mana. Mind's Eye can draw you a card whenever an opponent draws a card by paying 1. In a multiplayer game, it really shines. And Azor's Gateway, being able to loot, essentially, but when you get to 5 cards with different converted mana costs exiled with it, it flips into a land that taps for mana equal to your life total, which I think I've only ever flipped it once, and when I did, I think I won that turn, just because you can cast multiple Eldrazi's in a turn, you can pay for all this overcosted colorless stuff, and you don't even notice. There's going to be more removal on top of the All Is Dust and the Ugins. In the middle there, you've got Unstable Obelisk. Not the strongest of cards, but in colorless, you'll take whatever you can that can destroy enchantments, planeswalkers, creatures. So 3 mana rock that pay 7, tap it, sacrifice it, destroy target permanent. On the right-hand side over there, you've got Karn, nice colorless planeswalker that goes after permanents, as does Spine of Ish Sah. On the left-hand side, you've got Duplicate that exiles creatures, and you've got Spatial Contortion, which, some people might not agree with in the deck, but a 2-mana piece of interaction that can kill a key creature. There's some very powerful commanders that only have 3 toughness. It's also something people don't really expect. It's one of those slots that you might not agree with, but it's something I found that works for me in this deck. So there's the miscellaneous aspect of colorless. As not every card in the deck is going to be as incredibly powerful as All Is Dust or, your overpowered Mana Rocks or your Eldrazi's, there are some other card choices that kind of matter. So Sculpting Steel and Mirage Mirror there at the back. Sculpting Steel just copies artifacts. Mirage Mirror can be a copy of a creature, artifact, enchantment, or land until end of turn. And then we've got Kuldotha Forgemaster, which is one of the few tutors we have in the deck. This can help you get your Voltaic Construct into play, your Metalworker, and you've got Manifold Key as something that can help you untap your artifacts, which can be quite helpful with, even with your things that tap for 3, it kind of helps pump you ahead, because you're paying 1 to untap something, tap for 3, go down to 2, untap it, 5. So Manifold Key is just kind of the, slots in, works with a lot of different cards really well. Now the rest of the RAM package. So you have seen the artifacts that tap for 3 or more. Here's the rest of them. So Forsaken Monument is another one of those great cards in colorless. It's down there in the bottom left. Creatures you control, colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add an additional colorless. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. So kind of like a Mirage Wake on steroids. Pumping things by an extra 1, gaining you some life. You've got Mana Crypt, Coalition Relic, which, even though it produces color mana, it's a 3-mana artifact that basically nets you 2. Expedition Map to go and get non-basic lands. Actually, I don't even think this deck is... I think this deck's only playing 1 basic. But there in the middle I have Crucible of Worlds. And you're probably wondering why. Well, I will show you in just a second. But a good interaction with Coalition Relic and Unwinding Clock is your artifacts untap during other players' untap steps, so you can just load up the charge counters on the Relic and on your turn have, 3 mana waiting for you. So now let's talk about those lands that I forgot there was another slide before, that work really well with Crucible of Worlds. And this is where a lot of players end up hating this deck unless they're expecting to play really, really cutthroat Magic. So these are lands that kill lands. Strip Mine is a classic. Tap, sacrifice it, destroy target land. Crucible of Worlds, you just keep playing it every turn. A lot of decks cannot beat that lock. Backup, Strip Mines, you got Wasteland. Wasteland only goes for non-basics. And Dust Bowl, sacrifice a land, destroy target non-basic land. Encroaching Waste and Tectonic Edge are, the weaker ones. But they all do very similar things. Strip Mine, of course, being the best. These with Crucible of Worlds, it's just, it's kind of game over. If someone can't ramp or can't draw into lands, you can just shut someone out of the game very easily. Other key lands that are great to get back with Crucible of Worlds, there's Urza Saga, which is great in this deck. It can make Karnstruct tokens. It can search for artifacts with converted mana cost 1 or less, so your Mana Crypt, your Soul Ring, your Sensei's Divining Top. Inventor's Fair lets you search for specific artifacts, like maybe go get your Voltaic Construct or your Metalworker, and then you can just replay it again with Crucible of Worlds. And then you've got the cards that work particularly well with Eldrazi. So Eye of Ugin, colorless Eldrazi spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. And you can pay 7, tap it, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This normally draws a lot of hate. If people are running land destruction, Eye of Ugin normally gets killed very quickly. So being able to get it back with Crucible is incredible. And Sanctum of Ugin, taps for colorless, or whenever you cast a colorless spell with converted mana cost 7 or greater, that's pretty much all of our Eldrazi's, you may sacrifice it. If you do, search your library for a colorless creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, shuffle your library. So maybe you can use that to go get another Eldrazi or a combo piece, and then just replay it with Crucible, getting maximum value out of your lands. Other key cards, Scorched Ruins is there in the center. When it comes into play, sacrifice 2 untapped lands or bury Scorched Ruins, or that's the old word for sacrifice. Tap, add 4 colors to your mana pool. So if you're playing Scorched Ruins, sacrificing your lands, you're not really going down if you're able to then replay them with Crucible of Worlds. Eldrazi Temple and Ancient Tomb, tap for 2. Eldrazi Temple only for Eldrazi's. Ancient Tomb at the cost of 2 damage, but in Commander that's not a big deal. This deck is also running the Urza lands. You don't really assemble Urzatron that often, but it can happen, and when it does, it's very strong. And Crystal Vein, taps for colorless, so you tap and sack it to add 2 colorless, and again, just something you can replay with Crucible of Worlds. Other key cards that, not as powerful or potent as the others, but definitely serve a purpose. Blast Zone is a way for you to deal with troublesome non-land permanents, and, it's not really much of a cost that it's mana intensive because this deck produces a crazy amount of mana. War Room, basically pay 3, tap it. You don't even have to pay life because you're playing a colorless deck just to draw a card. Scavenger Grounds is a little bit of graveyard hate. And then Crawling Barrens. Crawling Barrens, interestingly enough, if you hit infinite mana and someone doesn't have blockers or interaction, you can just make it an infinitely big creature and knock someone out of the game right away, which is why it is in this deck. It's pretty good on its own, but having, crazy amounts of mana or going infinite just turns it into a very potent threat that, you know, can just knock a player out or win you a game. Another interesting choice for colorless decks is Deserted Temple. So Deserted Temple taps for colorless, or you can pay 1 tap it to untap target land. Very obvious choice for this is Maze of Ith. So Maze of Ith is a great defensive land. Doesn't tap for mana, which is why this deck runs 38, 39 lands, I think. But you can tap it to untap target attacking creature, prevent all combat damage. So we've dealt 2 and dealt by that creature this turn. So with Deserted Temple, you can do that twice. It also works very well with Scorched Ruins. So Scorched Ruins taps for 4, Deserted Temple it. Now you are up 7 mana off of 2 lands. So Urzatron in 2 cards. And then you've got War Room, where just if I know it's a lot to pay 7 mana to draw 2 cards, but if you have nothing else to do, lots of mana sitting there, getting 2 cards with just your lands is great. Now, we talked about Rings of Brighthearth earlier being a 2-card combo with Basalt Monolith. Rings of Brighthearth synergizes with so much in this deck. You have activated abilities for days. Tutor with your Eye of Ugin, instead of paying 7, why not pay 9? Go for 2 colorless. Maze of Ith, someone's attacking you with 2 creatures, both are frozen out. Treasure Map, get those landmark counters on it faster, get there quicker. Staff of Domination, overcosted, but you know what? Rings of Brighthearth gets you there. Strip Mine, why destroy 1 land when you could destroy 2? Expedition Map, go for 2 lands. Karn, exile 2 things. Endbringer, just ridiculous with this card. Golem Forge Master, sacrifice 3 artifacts to go for an artifact. How about you sacrifice 3 artifacts to go for 2? That is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you thought of my deck or my card choices. The full deck list is in the description below, along with a link to tappedout.com. I make these videos for fun. Please let me know if you'd like me to keep making them. Thanks. Bye.